Good morning, everyone. This is Marek Sobolewski, and welcome to our podcast, Expect the Unexpected. And that's what happened today. We're recording another time, and I know I'm taking time of the guest. Expect the Unexpected, navigating through commercial real estate in Ridgewood and the area surrounded. And today we're gonna talk about the sub-rehabilitation of the 6 family buildings in the city of New York. And I have a guest, Kenneth, Ken Volandes. He's attorney from Greenpoint, but actually he practices over close to maybe 25 years, over 25 years on it. So welcome to the show. Thank you, Ken, for joining us. You're an attorney. You're located in Greenpoint and 33 in Nassau Avenue. And
That's right.
Maybe you can tell a little bit about yourself.
Marek, again, thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I would be amiss if I didn't say Dzień dobry, because I know Marek is of Polish descent. I work and live in Greenpoint, but my practice focuses on all the 5 boroughs. And my parents actually are Greek immigrants. They came here, and just like many Greek immigrants, they opened up a diner. And that's where I used to work on the weekends. And that's where I learned about customer service. And I think what distinguishes many of the professionals in real estate is that if you want to be a good real estate attorney, if you want to be a good real estate broker, a good real estate banker, you need to appreciate customer service. And I pride myself on my practice being one that is responsive to my clients' needs. As Marek knows, I pick up my phone. I think that's one of the biggest complaints I get of real estate attorneys is that they don't pick up their phones. But you will have my cell phone, my associates pick up their phones, my partners pick up their phones. And not only do we focus on customer service, but I think real estate closings can at times be frustrating. And one way to alleviate this frustration is to educate customers and clients. And that's what we're doing today. Today we are going to talk about the concept of substantial rehabilitation. Can you today get a rent-stabilized building out of stabilization using substantial rehab by renovating the majority of the building?
Yeah, it's not a simple subject. It's not a regular renovation because you're thinking, oh, I'm going to renovate the building and going to destabilize it. It's like when you bought a 2-3 family and you renovate the building and you can get a higher rent. On 6 families, completely different. So before we even go on discussing that, why did you get into real estate, on it?
Why did I get into real estate? Because I enjoy dealing with characters.
Especially you learn a lot of stuff from diner, right?
Yes.
You used to work at the diner.
Definitely. My dad bought a few buildings when he moved to New York, so I had some exposure to that. But I think the great thing about real estate is there are many disciplines within real estate. Therefore, if you're into sales, if you're into underwriting, analytics, architecture, creativity in terms of designing buildings, all those things are important skill sets in real estate. But I think for me, the one thing that is my strength and I think is very important in real estate is managing people and listening to people. And whether that means my client, whether that means a broker colleague, whether that means the banker, whether that means a tenant, real estate is a people business. It's a business where you really need to listen to whoever's sitting across the table from you. And that's what drew me and draws me into real estate is working and collaborating with a wide variety of people.
So that's a perfect stuff. You went into the real estate. You like to collaborate. You have to educate people. On that, which is very good stuff. But today, as we mentioned earlier, we're talking about the six families and up, sub-rehab. Can you describe a little bit what the sub-rehab means?
Yeah, so sub rehab was a part of the Department of Housing Community Renewal, their regulations. The spirit of sub rehab was the DHCR wanted to have a way for buildings that were dilapidated, buildings that were considered uninhabitable, buildings that were, in essence, about to fall. The DHCR said, okay, we're going to have this carve out where if the owner rehabilitates 80% of the mechanicals, that we were going to make the exception that that building would no longer be rent stabilized, that it would have free market status. Therefore, a owner would replace 80% of the mechanicals, the plumbing, the electrical, the windows, the roof. And as long as 80% of the mechanicals were replaced, that building would obtain free market status. Now, in March 2024, there were regulations passed by the DHCR that, in essence, didn't change the spirit of the law, but definitely changed on the process. Prior to 2024, an owner who had a vacant building, in many respects, that vacant building had the presumption that the building was uninhabitable. Secondly, prior to 2024, the owner would do 80% of the renovations. And what the owner would do is they would just document those renovations, which means they would save canceled checks. They would get contractor affidavits. They would get architect affidavits. Like we said, before and after video photos. They would get building department permits. They would get cost affidavits. And they would just compile this list of documents. And only if a tenant challenged the status of the building, or only if the TPU, perhaps the tenant protective unit, did an audit of that building, then it would be the burden would be on the owner to show that, okay, tenant, you're challenging the free market status of the building. DHCR, you're challenging the free market status of the building. Let me show you these documents that substantiate that 80% of the building was renovated. And that's what a lot of owners did. They would renovate the buildings. They would put free market tenants in there, and then many of them would go sell the building. And only if that building was challenged would they have to prove the status of the building. 2024, March comes along, DHR passes a new law that says if you did renovations starting in January 1st, 2024, now you would have to, number one, prove to the DHCR that the building was dilapidated. You no longer got the presumption that because it's vacant, it required a substantial rehabilitation. And once you show that the building was, in essence, uninhabitable, and that's a very subjective term, then you would have to do your renovations, 80% of the building to be gut renovated. Probably spend $1 million doing that. And then once you got sign off, then you would make a determination. You would request a determination from the DHCR whether you could receive free market status. So in essence, that's a big risk because you could spend the $1 million, submit a request for determination, and the DHR could reject you. And that's where we are today. Now, one way to mitigate that risk, and I have a client in Williamsburg who inherited a building. One way you can mitigate that risk is you could request an opinion letter from the DHR. So you submit the same documents, and it takes you 30 to 45 days, and the DHR can issue a judicial opinion letter, which says, what's the likelihood of you getting a successful determination? And that's what I did for my client. We submitted a request for an opinion letter. 30 to 45 days came, and the DHR said, based on your photos, which showed a building filled with mold, which showed roofs that were opened, which showed electrical wiring that was out of code, the opinion letter came back and said, there's a good likelihood, not a guarantee, but it's very likely that this building would pass the substantial rehab. So my client went forward and spent a good amount of money renovating the building. And now that we have sign off, we'll submit that letter of determination. Today, post 2024, and I may have mentioned that the Attorney General is also suing P Capital, which renovated 159 units using substantial rehab, took those units out of stabilization, and now the Attorney General is saying P Capital, the Attorney General is alleging that those buildings didn't require substantial rehabilitation, and therefore the Attorney General is requesting that those free market buildings be brought back into stabilization. So I think in the end, today, this approach of using subs rehab to get free market status is even more difficult.
Yeah, especially I had the case, actually not the case, I had a client, I called somebody. That was during this year, and they were selling 6-family building. I saw online, $2 million. It's vacant, and I asked, you have all paperwork, and they said they're going to get a determination or whatever of the building. But what happened? The HCR denied, and next thing I know, they were selling that building for 1.3 and change, because I think they saw the pictures, or either permits on the building. They were pulled out at a certain time. Based on that, the building was habitable, and they denied that. And today, I just want to reinforce it. We're just talking. It's not, we're not giving, Ken is not giving any legal advices. This is just for the information podcast. And what's the timing usually to get that, from the beginning to the end?
And you bring up a great point, Marek. In today's world, the building is not the collateral; it's the paperwork. The paperwork is the collateral. It's what the bank is going to rely on to issue the loan, and it's what the DHR is going to rely on to determine the status of this building. And I know many of your listeners are brokers, and for brokers, the most important asset is their time. And I would highly encourage brokers to do their own audit of buildings when someone comes to them and says, okay, I want you to spend all 6 months marketing this building because it's free market. Well, the brokers need to do their own audit of the building, because I don't want them to waste time marketing a building that, like your example, the owner is claiming free market but is rent stabilized. So what are some red flags that could show that a alleged free market building is actually stabilized? To your point, if they're claiming sub-rehab, but 10 years ago there were pictures on Street Easy of a renovated building, the DHR is going to deny that sub-rehab. Number two, partial renovations. If they did, 50% of the building was renovated in 5 years ago, and the remaining 50% was renovated 3 years ago. Partial renovations, that's another red flag from the DHCR. If the building, when they submitted their building permits, if their cost affidavits, otherwise known as the PW3, if a full renovation would cost $800,000, but in their cost affidavit they listed the renovation as being $200,000, the DHR is likely going to deny them of sub-rehab. In addition, if you ask the seller, how did you get this building vacant? And if the building says, well, I spent $200,000 buyouts, there is case law that shows that the DHR denied sub-rehab on buildings that were vacated with high buyouts because the DHR's logic was, how is this building uninhabitable if you just paid someone $185,000 to get out? Again, the brokers, in order to pick and choose what buildings are worth marketing, they need to do their own audits. And I know a lot of brokers that, especially for the bigger rent stabilized buildings, if the seller doesn't hire an attorney or a consultant to do their work before marketing, the broker says, I don't want to spend time on something where I don't know the status of stabilization or free market. Why don't you work with a consultant or an attorney to determine that before we go to market? And because of the Attorney General litigation, because of the 2024 regulations that were passed, today I think the business model of using sub-rehab to get units out of stabilization is riskier. And that's why, as your clients are doing, now a lot of these six families, especially ones that have vacancies, are being considered by end users. Why don't I buy a six family in Ridgewood for around $1 million and live in it? And, the rents can help pay my mortgage. And you can afford a six family where you may not be able to afford a 2 or 3 family in Ridgewood these days.
Yeah, I think back in the day, in the 80s, our families, they were coming from overseas, and you can see working people moving to one of the apartments and help collected rent paid for the mortgage. That was the model, and I've seen many families doing that, because they couldn't afford to buy the 2-3 family or single family because they were astronomical, and the rent was helping. Same thing happening right now. We have buildings, as Ken mentioned, 6 families with 1 vacancy, 2 vacancies, so you can move in, actually live, and collect the rent.
I mean, I had an example in Bushwick, 2 families, two young couples. There was a 6 family with 2 vacant apartments. They were going to go 50-50 on it. They were each going to provide 50% of the equity. And they were going to, I think people that are buying stabilized assets now, it's not a 2 to 5 year game plan. It really needs to be a 7 to 10 year game plan. They're buying them, for example, a 6 family, because the price per foot is less expensive. They're buying it because the interest rates, if they drop a little, perhaps they can make some appreciation there. And they're buying it hoping that in the next 7 to 10 years, the laws will change, which will make it easier to increase rents. And in the short term, they're taking advantage of, they can live in it for the next 7 to 10 years. The thing that it will be different from, let's say, a 2 to 5 family, a 2 to 4 family, is they probably have to come to the table with 40% of the equity, not 20%. And they will have to renovate apartments that they live in, but they will have to stay in those apartments for 7 to 10 years, perhaps, because now if you live in the apartment, you renovate it. If you move out, you're going to have to rent it for the legal rent. So you have to be mindful of how much money you're going to spend on that renovation budget. But it's interesting because I agree with you. Like, from what I hear in the 70s and 80s, people were buying 6 families and living in them. And that's what people are doing again today.
Yeah, that's especially you cannot increase the rents on it. You cannot like on a free market. And also another thing new, not Amazon, Whole Foods. It's coming to Ridgewood.
That's right. Big news.
Big news.
Whole Foods is coming to Ridgewood. Ridgewood is going to have its moment. If we think of the impact Whole Foods had on Bedford and Williamsburg, if we think of what the impact Whole Foods had in Union Square when it opened up there, but now Whole Foods is opening up at a closed Rite Aid on Cornelia Street.
Yeah, closer. I think by on Myrtle Avenue.
Yes.
Between Cypress and St. Nicholas over there, where I think it used to be bank.
Yeah.
Bank, and after that the pharmacy.
Yes.
And that's the plan on that.
And Marek is the number 1 broker in Ridgewood. So
I wouldn't say that on it, but I'm very familiar with Ridgewood and also rent stabilization. I'm not giving any legal advice. That's why Ken is for, but not today. If you're planning to buy a rent stabilized building, you have to know a lot Same thing on if the seller plans to sell the rent stabilized building, even he has a vacant building, it's very tricky what pricing is gonna be set, at the beginning. It's determined by many factors in New York City right now on it, and hopefully it's gonna change. But also at the same time, you don't want to put the pressure on the tenants. You don't want to. They've been living there. The income doesn't, whatever you have, it's like it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's, if you're looking to sell a vacant six family, or if you're looking to buy a six family where the owner is alleging free market status, I think that's a great time to reach out to Marek, to reach out to me, to have the conversation before you go to market. To have the conversation before you go to market, and to have the conversation before you buy the asset, and to do your due diligence. And if you're going to buy an asset that is being alleged as free market, what documents you need. Ideally, you get the letter of determination where the seller already has it. If the seller doesn't have that letter, then you want to get those cost affidavits from the contractor, canceled checks, because at the end of the day, there are no free market rent stabilized apartments anymore. In terms of, there's not 100% guarantee. Like we said, the paperwork is the collateral. Therefore, you can't get certainty, but you can mitigate the risk that the apartment that's being alleged as free market is stabilized. And how do you mitigate that risk? By getting as much paperwork as possible.
So just to summarize today, podcast, there's an opportunity to buy six family because they're cheaper. But at the same time, if you're planning to sub-rehab, you're involved buying a six family building, vacant, you have to do diligence. And that's why Ken comes in place on it, if it's worth it or if it's not worth it. He just go over the procedures. You're gonna, there is an opinion letter, determination letter on a two-steps process. And what happens if the building doesn't qualify on it? Is there an angle you can go, or?
Yeah, if the opinion letter comes back negative, you can pivot. You can pivot perhaps to go back to stabilization. You can pivot to perhaps selling it. You can pivot to perhaps doing condos. But at least you could get this opinion letter, which again is not a conclusive statement, but it can give you guidance. And based on that guidance, you can determine whether it's worth spending $1 million to get the determination letter, or whether you need to pivot and do a alternative plan.
I think another good quote for the listeners you have.
The good quote for the listeners is, Ridgewood's about to have its moment. Whole Foods is coming. Reach out to Marek if you want to find out what your building's worth today in Ridgewood, or if you're looking to buy in Ridgewood.
Yeah, if you have any legal questions, please contact Ken. He's reachable all the time.
Yes.
Except when he's with daughter skiing,
That's true.
But he always not answer, but he can also give you a guidance on it,
Most definitely. And I have to use my Polish again to say dziękuję. Thank you very much, Marek, for having me today. And I look forward to following up with you on this topic.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. Thanks for being here. And his office, as I mentioned, that's in Greenpoint, 33 and Nassau Avenue.
Exactly. See you soon.
See you. Thanks, Ken.
Bye.
Bye-bye.